There are men in this world whose names you don't say out loud in certain rooms. Not because it's forbidden exactly, because the air changes when you do. Lena Marsh had no idea she was about to say one of those names. She was 22 years old, 4 months into her job at Aldridge, which was the kind of hotel where the flower arrangements cost more than her monthly rent, and the guests had a particular way of looking through you, not at you, through you, as though you were part of the furniture. Lena had learned to move like furniture, quiet, efficient, invisible. That Tuesday night, the Crystal Ballroom had been rented out for a private dinner. 40 guests, 4 long tables, candlelight that made everything look softer than it was. Lena's job was simple: keep the water glasses full, keep her eyes down, keep moving. She was halfway through her third pass around the room when she heard the voice. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" It wasn't loud. That was the thing. It wasn't a shout. It was the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud, because the entire room's nervous system already understood that when this particular man spoke, you listened. Lena turned, and that was the moment everything in her life divided into before and after. But before we get to that moment, before we get to what Lena did, and what it cost her, and what it gave her, you need to understand one thing about her. Lena Marsh was not the kind of girl who looked for trouble. She'd grown up in Claremont, Ohio, the daughter of a mechanic and a school librarian. She'd gotten a partial scholarship to a state school, studied hospitality management because it was practical, and graduated with $18,000 in debt and no illusions about the world. She'd applied to Aldridge because the benefits package included dental. Not because she had dreams of rubbing elbows with the powerful. She didn't want to rub elbows with anyone. She wanted to pay off her student loans and maybe one day open a small bed and breakfast somewhere with a porch. That was the entire vision. So when she took the serving position at the Crystal Ballroom that Tuesday night, she wasn't thinking about anything except which table needed bread rolls and whether the gentleman in the blue tie at table 3 was about to complain about his wine temperature again. She noticed the man in the corner the way you notice a storm front coming in from the west. Not immediately, not consciously, just a creeping awareness that something in the atmospheric pressure had shifted. He was sitting alone at the far end of table 1. That was unusual. Every other seat at that table had 2 or 3 people clustered together, leaning in, laughing with the particular intensity of people who wanted to be seen laughing. But there was a clean circle of empty space around this man, like the others had unconsciously pulled back without being asked. He was somewhere in his early 40s. Dark suit, no tie, black hair going silver at the temples, a jaw that looked like it had been carved, not grown. He wasn't eating. He had a glass of red wine in front of him that he hadn't touched, and he was watching the room with the flat, measuring gaze of someone who was not here to enjoy himself. He was here because this was business. Lena clocked him and moved on. He wasn't at her station, not her problem. She was wrong about that, as it turned out. The trouble started with a boy named Preston Caulfield. Preston was 26, the son of one of the event's hosts, wearing a suit that his mother had probably picked out and carrying the specific energy of a young man who had been told his whole life that he was exceptional. He had a group of friends around him at table 2, 3 other young men in expensive shirts, the kind of friends who laughed at everything you said and called it humor. Lena had been refilling water glasses at the adjacent table when she heard one of Preston's friends say something she wasn't meant to hear. She didn't catch all of it, just enough. Something about the old man in the corner, something about how nobody actually believed the stories, something about how a guy that quiet couldn't really be, and then Preston laughed. "Old Nico Ferrante? Please. My dad says he's basically retired, sells restaurant equipment now or something. The whole thing is overblown. Besides," Lena didn't hear the rest because she was already moving toward table 1, not because she had a plan. That's the thing about Lena Marsh. She didn't think first. She acted on instinct, and her instinct said, "That boy is going to do something stupid, and you need to be somewhere else when he does it." But she was too slow. Preston Caulfield, emboldened by his friends and 2 glasses of champagne and a lifetime of nobody ever telling him no, pushed back his chair and walked across the room toward the man sitting alone in the corner. The room didn't go silent immediately. It went silent in waves, like the quiet spreading outward from a stone dropped in still water. First the people nearest to table 1, then the next ring, then the next. Until by the time Preston reached the man's table, the crystal ballroom was absolutely perfectly still. "Mr. Ferrante," Preston said, and there was still a note of performance in his voice. He was doing this for his friends, for the audience, proving something. "I wanted to introduce myself. Preston Caulfield. My father is Howard Caulfield. He's the one who organized tonight. I just wanted to say—" "You wanted to say what you said at your table," the man replied. His voice was soft, completely even, about restaurant equipment. The color drained out of Preston's face so fast it was almost physical, like watching a cloth go white under bleach. "I sit down, son." Preston sat, not at his own table. He sat down in the nearest empty chair, which happened to be 2 feet from where Nico Ferrante was watching him, and he didn't move again for the rest of the evening. The room began breathing again, gradually, carefully, like people emerging from underwater, and Lena Marsh, who had been standing 3 feet away with a water pitcher in her hand, having heard every word, made the single worst decision of her professional life. She stepped forward and refilled Nico Ferrante's untouched glass of water. He looked up at her. His eyes were gray. Not blue-gray or green-gray. Gray, the way old stone is gray, the way the sky looks an hour before a serious storm. There was nothing warm in them, but there was also nothing cruel. They were simply eyes that had seen too much and had given up pretending otherwise. "Thank you," he said. Lena nodded and turned to go. "You heard what he said." She stopped, turned back slowly. "Yes," she said, "because lying to this man seemed like a very specific kind of stupidity. And you came over anyway. It's my job to refill water glasses." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. The idea of a smile, maybe. A memory of one. "Is that what that was?" he said. It wasn't a question. Lena didn't answer. She went back to work, and she spent the next 2 hours convincing herself that the conversation hadn't happened and that she'd imagined the way he'd watched her walk away. She found out what she'd actually done 3 days later. She was finishing her shift 11:40 at night, walking through the employee exit on the east side of the building with her coat half-buttoned, when a black car pulled up to the curb and a man got out. Not Nico Ferrante. A different man, late 50s, silver hair, a face like a worn leather boot. He held up one hand. "Miss Marsh." She stopped. "How do you know my name?" "Mr. Ferrante would like to speak with you." The sane response was, "No, thank you." The sane response was to go back inside and tell her manager and let the professionals handle whatever this was. Lena Marsh looked at the man and looked at the car and thought about her student loans and her porch dream and her very ordinary, very careful life. Then she got in the car. Later, she couldn't entirely explain why. The closest she could get was this. Something in her gut told her she was already in it, that the moment she'd stepped forward with that water pitcher, she'd made a choice, and now she was living in the consequences of that choice, and getting in the car was simply honest about that fact. The car took her to a restaurant on the west side that was closed for the evening. Inside, 2 men she didn't recognize were sitting at a table near the kitchen, and Nico Ferrante was at a corner booth, reading something on his phone, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up when she came in, gestured at the seat across from him. She sat. "You're not afraid," he observed. "I'm terrified," she said. "I'm just not going to let it run me." This time, something in his face did move. It was small, a slight easing around the eyes, a fractional release of whatever he was holding clamped down in there. But it was real. "What do you know about me?" he asked. "Before 3 days ago? Nothing. Now." She hesitated. "The internet exists, and I know enough to understand that I should be choosing my words carefully." "Good," he said. "Then choose them carefully when I ask you what I'm about to ask you." He set his phone down, folded his hands on the table, looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. "There was a woman at table 4 on Tuesday night. Brown coat. She sat alone. Did you notice her?" Lena thought back. Scanned her memory of the room. She left early, around 9, before dessert was served. "Did you see who she spoke to before she left?" Lena had. She'd noticed because it was slightly odd. The woman had paused on her way out and said something to one of the catering staff, a young man Lena didn't recognize, who had then disappeared into the kitchen and not come back out. She described this. All of it. Precisely. Nico Ferrante listened without moving. When she finished, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You have a very good memory." "I pay attention," Lena said. "It's the job. It's more than the job." She didn't argue. "The woman," he said finally, "was delivering information to someone who intended to use it to hurt someone I care about. You are the only person who noticed what she did." The silence in the restaurant was absolute. Outside, somewhere, a car passed. Inside, Lena could hear herself breathe. "Is the person you care about?" She started carefully. "She's fine," he said. "She's fine because we found out in time. Because you, without knowing what you were doing, described enough of what you saw to fill in the last piece." Lena absorbed this. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Nico Ferrante said, "you have a problem. Because the woman in the brown coat knows you were working that room, and she is going to be made aware very shortly that the information didn't reach its destination, and she is going to want to understand why." The weight of it settled on Lena's chest like a hand pressing down. "I didn't do anything," she said. I just described what I saw." "I know," he said. "That's why you have a problem. And here's where the story turns. Here's where you need to understand who Nico Ferrante actually was. Not the version from the internet, not the rumors, not the half-true stories, but the actual man. He was the third son of a man named Aldo Ferrante, who had built something in this city over 30 years that most people only spoke about in the specific, careful language people use when they don't want to be quoted. Nico had not chosen this life in the way people in movies choose things, with dramatic moments and speeches. He'd grown into it the way you grow into your father's coat, gradually, until one day you look in the mirror and it fits. He ran things with a precision that bordered on obsession. He had rules. He had them because he'd watched men without rules destroy themselves and everyone around them. And he had decided, a long time ago, that he would not be one of those men. One of his rules was this: you don't let innocent people pay for your problems. Lena Marsh was innocent. She hadn't known what she was seeing. She'd just done her job, and she'd done it with the kind of quiet attentiveness that he recognized. The way you recognize something you rarely encounter. A person who genuinely paid attention to the world around them. Not because they were suspicious, not because they were calculating, but because they were present. He'd noticed it Tuesday night, when she'd stepped forward with the water pitcher. She hadn't been performing calm. She actually was calm. That was rare. That was almost unheard of. He'd noticed it again just now, watching her process the information he'd given her. No histrionics, no tears, no bargaining. She sat with the weight of it, turned it over, and asked the right question. What happens now? Not why me. Not this isn't fair. Not please help me. What happens now? Nico Ferrante had met a great many people in his life. He could count the ones who'd asked that particular question on one hand. "You'll stay somewhere safe," he told her, "until this is resolved." "I have a job," she said. "We'll take care of that. I have an apartment, a cat. We'll take care of that too." She looked at him steadily. "Why?" "Because you helped someone I love," he said, "without knowing it and without being asked. And I don't leave debts unpaid. I didn't do it to be owed." "I know that," he said. "That's exactly why I owe you." She stayed in a townhouse on the north side that belonged to one of his associates. It had a decent kitchen and a back garden, and came with a ginger cat named something unpronounceable that she renamed Gerald. The man who'd met her at the employee exit, whose name, she eventually learned, was Darrow, brought Gerald and a bag of his food the following afternoon, along with 3 boxes of Lena's things, packed with a neatness that suggested someone who had strong opinions about organization. Nico didn't visit that first day, or the second. On the third day, he showed up at 7 in the evening with takeout from a place she'd never heard of, and let himself in like he'd done it 100 times, set the bags on the kitchen counter, and looked at her. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," she said. "How's the person you were protecting?" He paused. "Better, good." He stayed for 2 hours. They ate at the kitchen table. She'd found a tablecloth in a drawer and spread it out, some domestic instinct she couldn't quite suppress. And he asked her about herself in the way that men like him ask about things, not casual, not chatty, but direct, specific, interested in accuracy. She told him about Claremont, Ohio, about her parents, about the partial scholarship and the debt and the dental benefits, about the bed and breakfast with a porch. He listened. When she was done, she asked, "Do you actually sell restaurant equipment?" He was quiet for a beat. "No, I know. Then why ask?" "'Cause I wanted to see if you'd lie to me." Something shifted in his face again. That same small easing. "And you didn't," she said. "That matters to me." He looked at her for a long moment across the tablecloth she'd found in the drawer, in this kitchen that wasn't hers, in a situation that had arrived without her consent, and something in him rearranged itself quietly. "It matters to me too," he said. The woman in the brown coat was found. Lena didn't ask for details and Nico didn't offer them. What he told her was, "It's done. You're safe. You can go home." She should have felt relief. She did feel relief. But standing in the doorway of the townhouse with Gerald in a carrier and her 3 boxes loaded into Darrow's car, she also felt something else. Something she didn't have an immediate name for. Nico was standing on the front step. He'd come to tell her himself, which she suspected was not his usual practice. "Thank you," she said. "For all of this." "Thank you," he said, "for the water glass." A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. He looked almost startled by it, the way people who don't hear laughter very often look when they do, like they'd forgotten what it sounded like and were quietly remembering. "If you wanted to," he said, "there's a dinner. Next week. Nothing like the one at Aldridge. Small, quiet, people I actually trust." She looked at him. "Is that your way of asking me to dinner?" "It is," he said. "That's the least smooth invitation I've ever received," she said. "I'm aware," he said. "Is that a no?" Lena Marsh thought about her ordinary life, her porch dream, her careful, sensible plan for everything. Then she looked at Nico Ferrante standing on a front step in a city that held its breath when he walked through it, asking her to dinner with the particular clumsiness of a man who did not do this often and was not entirely sure of the rules. "It's a yes," she said. He nodded once, like a man filing important information. "Darrow will pick you up at 7. "Darrow," she said. "Always Darrow. He's reliable, I noticed." She picked up Gerald's carrier, took one step toward the car, stopped. "The person you were protecting," she said. "The one I accidentally helped." He waited. "Is she okay? Really?" Nico Ferrante looked at Lena Marsh for a long moment. This 22-year-old girl from Claremont, Ohio, with her student loans and her porch dream, and her instinct to step forward when she should step back. And something in his expression did something she hadn't seen it do before. It opened, just slightly, just for a second. "She is," he said, "because of you." "Good," Lena said, and she got in the car. There's a particular kind of strength that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come in wearing a suit, it doesn't carry a title, it doesn't make the room go quiet when it enters. It shows up in ordinary shoes, holding a water pitcher, paying attention to things that most people have already decided are beneath their notice. Lena Marsh didn't know what she was walking into when she stepped forward that Tuesday night at the Crystal Ballroom. She didn't know that the man in the corner had been watching the room for a threat that had almost reached its target. She didn't know that one quiet, attentive girl with a good memory was the last piece he needed. She just knew that something was wrong, and she moved toward it anyway. Some people call that bravery. Nico Ferrante called it something he didn't have a word for yet. Something he was planning to spend a great deal of time thinking about over a quiet dinner next week, with a girl who renamed cats and spread tablecloths in borrowed kitchens and asked what happens now instead of why me. You already know what he eventually called it. But that's a story for another time. If you're watching this and you've been with us from the beginning, you know what this channel is about. It's not about perfect people in perfect circumstances. It's about ordinary people who make the one unexpected choice that changes everything. If that's your kind of story, hit that like button and subscribe, because we have more coming that you are not going to want to miss. And I want to know, in the comments below, would you have gotten in the car? Would you have stepped forward with that water pitcher, knowing what you know now? Tell me. I'll be reading every single one.